Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Obviously, it's a mess out there, so really appreciate everybody making the effort to be here today. Let's start, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Any public audience? Okay, great. I guess that leaves us with committee reports and communications.
Hi. So at HGMS, the rehearsals for the musical SpongeBob are underway with about 70 students participating.
SpongeBob, that's going to be a good one.
The counseling office has also been sponsoring career fairs for students. They've invited guests to come to HGMS to share information about their careers and answer questions for the middle schoolers. At Latimer, phase 1 of construction is completed, and the 22,000 new square feet has been handed over to the school system so that the school can resume occupancy. At Terrafil, they're very close to moving into the new modular classrooms that you heard about at the beginning of the year, and Principal Matizik hopes to have everyone come for a tour when they're completed. At SQL, they had a successful Connecticut Children's Medical Center PJ Day for the kids, and they raised over $2,100. And SHS, the quarter two will end soon, meaning midterms are on the way, which should be starting this week. And the school musical is set to debut early February, as you may have heard. And the successful round of capstone presentations for the first semester has been completed, and a couple of students have fulfilled that requirement.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Josh?
No, just I guess one thing I would say is over the holiday break, just wanted to say thank you to my daughter was able to, in all of K through 8 in town, they did a lacrosse thing at the Day Hill Bubble, and it was put on by high school lacrosse, the girls lacrosse coaches and players and alumni. And just kind of those things, it's always really nice to kind of do that, to bring the whole community together. So just want to acknowledge them taking the time to do that during their break and how it was really fun for all the kids.
Great. That's awesome.
Nothing to report.
Brian?
Nothing as far as committees, just we're rolling into exam week at the high school.
Yes, we
So
are.
my kids are excited about that. But they're spaced out more this year. I think second year in a row maybe that they're spaced out, so that's good. So, yeah.
I just wanted to comment that, I don't know how often it's happened that the field trips, I got the privilege of going on a field trip this last week or a week before that to the Bushnell, and I don't know if that's the first one I've been on since COVID stuff, and the kids were so excited and such an enthusiastic group, and I thought lucky, and I was glad that it's back, and I thought it was a cool experience for all the kids. It was like a really neat Bushnell, all communities. The whole place was filled with students and buses and stuff.
Yeah, we're excited to see a return of many of our field trips that are related to curriculum and just great experiences for kids. So
Yeah,
that's
great.
great. Matthew, you were so comprehensive in your report. Just two quick things. One is a reminder that we have an early dismissal this Friday for professional development. So departments across the district will be engaged in a variety of topics related to their growth plans and specific curricular areas of focus. So it should be an exciting afternoon. The other, we actually have a visual for this communication. So wanted just to share some good news. This is a really cool collaboration that happens between kindergarten at Central School, specifically Mrs. Van Voris's classroom, and Henry James. So Ms. Van Voris discussed monsters and character development and what do good monsters sound like and look like and act like. So students engage in creating their own monsters, and they color them and they talk about them, and then those drawings are shared with Henry James. Henry James is just completing a sewing unit, so they use their sewing skills. They each select one of the monsters, so all students' monsters are made, and then they create felt replicas of these monsters. And they record voices and say a little bit about the monsters, and they make it in a QR code, and they put these tags on the monsters, and then they go deliver them to the kids. So it was just such a feel-good, like, collaboration, really making things come together. All of the students loved it, and just wanted to share that as some feel-good communication for the new year. That's it.
Matt had already taken my construction updates, and I won't try to follow that.
I'm not following that.
I'm set for you'll hear enough from me. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I just wanted to let the board know in their folder is a copy of the annual report, which is basically a data dashboard that aligns with our Board of Education goals. It's different markers we've put together over time. We post it on our website, send it out in a link to the parents. But these are important areas we've looked at. Administratively, you've provided feedback on as a board that represent our district. Along the lines of our four main board goals, right? So there's achievement work in there, there's work on professional development, there's work on our vision of the graduate and different ways that we represent those things, the cornerstone of our district. So it's pretty good visual. We'll be reporting on some of those things later on in the year in various reports, but wanted to get that in your hands. There you go.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. First up is the approval of the December 12th minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from December 12th.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Any discussion? Any questions, anything? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Personnel, Neil?
Yeah, two resignations that require your official vote tonight. The first is Nicole Cormier, who was a special education teacher at Simsbury High School. Been with us for 7 years. Had an opportunity to pursue an elementary vacancy in a nearby district, and took that opportunity. So she made that transition over the holiday break. So we wish Nicole well. And then secondly, in next week, we are having a transition in PE and health at Simsbury High School. Megan Lapinese has been with us for a couple of years, has decided to stay in the wellness field, kind of taking a direction into personal training. So she's going to take a veer out of K-12 for a little while and pursue that work that she's been doing a little bit on the side. So that's where Megan is headed. With the transition of the semester is when that's going to happen. So motion is there for someone to read into the record.
I'll move that the Board of Education accept the resignations of Nicole Cormier, effective December 31st, 2023, or 2023, and Megan Lapinese, effective January 19th, 2024.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. Rolling on, acceptance of a gift from our good friends at Ensign Bickford.
Yeah, so I would like to welcome up our Director of Instructional Technology, Dave Prinstein, along with great community partners from Ensign Bickford, Edris Raji, Sean Keon, and Austin Brady for the presentation of this gift. It's actually two separate gifts for your consideration this evening. One is a gift for $2,500 directly for our robotics team, and the other is in the tune of $10,000 for district-wide STEM enhancements and improvements. So, Dave, over to you.
Thanks, sir. Gentlemen, thank you so much. My first opportunity to thank you guys publicly, but I know this has been kind of a long-standing partnership, and I'm sure the board is well aware of it. Each year, we are fortunate enough to partner with Ensign Bickford Aerospace and Defense. They are so graciously supporting K-12, our students in the area of STEM. Past endeavors, uses of this money have included robotics, computing and coding, hands-on experiential learning, and really anything that delves into the realm of these 21st and even 22nd century learning standards and experiences. So from everyone here at Simsbury, and I know we have a couple of local guys among us, like myself, we really appreciate everything the company is doing, and we hope the really gracious partnership continues going forward. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you to everyone here. It's been a great partnership. All three of us are local to Simsbury, and we're located right here in Simsbury. We're excited about the opportunity of having students come through this over time, and then obviously we've got a lot of hiring needs, so hope they can go to school.
We like to hear that.
So we're excited about that, and I think you guys make it easy for us to partner with you guys with using the funds in a really good positive way. And so this is all part of the EBI or corporate charitable foundation. So they're looking to continue this, grow it, and do this for a long time. So thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Idris.
Thank you so much.
I mean, that big check. I'll get a picture of that.
If I could just say, just on behalf of the board, thank you so much. Your partnership is incredibly appreciated. As a father of a son who's in that STEM program, and will hopefully be looking for a job in 4 years, I just can't say it enough. We did college tours. We did like that. You better be watching. We did college tours this year, and we would go through some of these labs, and he'd say, "Well, we've worked on that machine or this machine," and that all, really goes back to the support you give. So just greatly appreciate it.
Jeff and Matt should.
Yeah.
Do the photo honors.
Big check.
That is the biggest check we've ever received. It's like a PGA golf tour check.
Dave, please. Should we say 1, 2, 3 STEM? Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yes. All right. Have a good evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Make a motion.
Thank you for reminding me. I'm caught up in trying to get my son a job. Distracted easily. So yes, there's a motion on there. Somebody.
I move that the proposed gift of $12,500 to STEM K-12 from Ensign Bigford Aerospace and Defense Company be accepted.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Again, thank you very much. That's the partnership is just incredible.
Really is.
Amazing. It really is long-standing.
And they were able last summer to go and view specifically some of our STEM labs and ways in which K-12 were utilizing these funds to promote STEM learning in Simsbury. So that was very helpful and very much validated the work that they're trying to do and that we're working to do with students here in Simsbury.
I'll add something. I actually participated in a co-op program with Ensign Bickford last spring, where I went and worked with the engineers on a project with a couple other students, and the experience that Simsbury High School gave me with the STEM lab and all of that equipment, which I now find out is funded by Ensign Bickford, really prepared me for what we did there.
That's great.
Really
That's
glad to hear that.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so
We have
to the budget.
Yeah, we have one report tonight, so I invite Katie Crisula to the center table, our Director of Pupil Services. So this report, it's an annual report, and it really serves two purposes. We're required to report out on our special ed programming from a performance standpoint, a key indicator standpoint on an annual basis. But this is also normally the formal kickoff to our budget season. We had the three-board meeting with the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, and our board prior to the break. And this is now when we come back and we provide our first kind of information to the Board of Education relative to what we see as potential needs coming up in this budget cycle. So I think Katie's put together a really informative presentation. We certainly have needs that we need to talk about and think through and discuss in this coming year. And Katie's going to walk us through, and we'll have plenty of time for any questions that people have.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me this evening, and I look forward to Really a two-part presentation to review kind of the work of the Pupil Services Department. What does it look like on a day-to-day basis? And then to give you some really informative data to help inform the 24-25 budget requests coming from the Pupil Services Department. Before I begin tonight, I need to recognize two of the people in this room, two of my wonderful supervisors, Katie Wallace, who's our supervisor of Pupil Services at Henry James, and Emily Barrett, who's our director of special ed. Farmington Valley Transition Academy are here with us. I can't say enough about the department that I work with on a day-to-day basis, from my supervisors to all of my teachers, the related service providers, and our paraeducators. It is certainly one of the most passionate, energetic, and truly dedicated groups of people that I've ever had a chance to work with, and certainly just all of the work and shares that I'm going to provide you this evening come from the work of our great special educators here in district. Okay, so I'm going to start us off again, like I said, with a program update. What is the work of the Pupil Services Department? I am required on an annual basis to inform the board of how Simsbury Public Schools special education is performing under the state systemic improvement plan. As you remember last year, if you may recall, we did not have results from the 21-22 school year. We did find out in August that we met those requirements. The state systemic improvement plan is built on 17 indicators that realm from achievement to graduation to inclusive of chronic absenteeism as of 2022. So it's 17 specific indicators where we are held to a standard set forth by the state of Connecticut that really helps to ensure we are implementing the requirements of IDEA. IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that is the federal law that requires us to meet those indicators. And so we are still waiting on the 22-23 results. And as soon as we have those, we will certainly provide an update for the board. But again, we met for 21-22. That is an update. We are waiting on 22-23. Okay. Really going into the more direct work of what is the day-to-day work of the special education department here in Simsbury. Following our structure of operation under the teaching and learning team, we certainly want to look at how special education works through a student growth and success lens, culture and climate, premier workplace, and sustained investments. And so here you will see a few of the primary focus points of our department this year. Under student growth and success, we are really taking a hard look and doing some really good learning and work around our service delivery, how we implement individualized services and direct instruction to help students access their education. Looking at that through a co-taught lens, through a group lens, through an individualized lens, and that's been really good work, primarily at the elementary level as well as 7-12. Another point that we've really taken a look at around student growth and success is our intensive learning needs programs. These were formerly known as the Ready, Set, Go program, and now we really want to ensure that all students involved in these programs are included, so we have changed the name to Intensive Learning Needs Program. We, as you'll see in our data later in this presentation, have seen an increase in the complexity of their needs as well as the number of those students. And it's been an important part of our department this year to ensure that we continue to meet every student's individualized needs within the capacity of their IEP or individualized education plan. So that's been a specific focus. The other area, if you move to culture and climate, is around professional development for our educators. I mentioned before, we couldn't do this work without all of the educators that are involved in providing special education services. So we've had some professional development opportunities in the area of behavior, service delivery, writing and implementing high quality individualized education plans or IEPs, as well as ensuring that we're providing professional development that is targeted, needed, requested, and applicable to our paraeducators. So working with our paraeducators to ensure that any professional development they are receiving is targeted and helpful to them. The other thing, last year at this time, you heard me come and talk a little bit about our new state IEP, otherwise known as the Connecticut Special Ed Data System. The state went to a singular IEP program across the state, and that was implemented last year. It came with a lot of bumps in the road and things that our staff here in district had to overcome, to no fault of anyone except for the logistics of that program. We continue to learn the program. I will say our educators here in Simsbury, they know it. They're working with it. It's becoming a part of our day-to-day. It still has its pangs and bruises, but we're working with the state to really support those needs. So that's certainly something our staff continues to work with. The last piece, this is going to be a nice on-ramp into our data conversation this evening. As we look at sustained investments and ensuring that the investments that the town of Simsbury puts towards special education, it's important that we continue to recognize and evaluate the increasing incidence of special education in our overall population, as well as, I mentioned this before, the changing complexity of needs with which our students in special education present with. So that is something that both from leadership level as well as in the building level, we continue to talk about and look at both data as well as that day-to-day operation. I want to start off as we go into our data conversations with just a thank you and recognition that last year at this time, one of our big requests was for additional special education teachers in the elementary level. And given those increases in the number of special education teachers, we have really been able to meet the caseload needs at the elementary level for our special education students who need academic support. This has allowed for collaborative work, some of that service delivery model work that I mentioned, allowed for collaborative work between general educators and special educators to increase access for all students. It's been really important work at the elementary level, and the addition of some special education teachers at the elementary level have evened out our caseloads and allowed the special educators to truly collaborate and work on providing the best support to those students. So thank you. So as I said, I am going to go now into the second part of this evening's conversation and presentation. As we go through this, you're going to see some various data points, and I really would like the data to tell our story, but welcome questions as they might come up individualized to each of these data slides. There will be two main through lines in these data points that we're going to go over, and that is we will look at that increased enrollment and incidence rates, as well as the increased complexity of needs that we continue to see here in Simsbury and how that is impacting our special education programs. It will also lead us to into the requests for the upcoming budget year of 24-25. So I'm going to start with a broad look around enrollment to talk about how you will see that continued increase in the incidence of special education in comparison to our total special education population. So here is a 5-year comparison of our total number of students and the percent change or increase. We have had growth in both special education as well as general education or total population. We've had about just under a 2% increase in the total number of students district-wide. All students in Simsbury, we right now have about 4,100 students. That is up just under 2% in the last 5 years. From that 4,100 students, you will see the total number of special education students sits just under 700 to date. That is up just about 15% in the last 5 years. So that change is significant, and it will be something that you will see reflected in many of the data points that we talked through this evening.
Katie, does that include preschool?
It does include preschool.
In that 4104?
The 4104 does not
Does
exist.
not.
But the 696
Yes,
does.
yes,
Okay.
correct. I'm sorry. I
yeah.
thought you meant special
No, that's
education
fine.
numbers. So, and certainly we will talk through those special ed preschool numbers as we go through later
Yeah.
this evening. Thank you for for clarifying that.
It would include 18 to 22-year-olds, though, on
Yes.
the other end.
Okay, got it.
So I've used the term incidence rate a few times this evening. Again, incident rate means the prevalence of students with special education needs, again, within your total population. 5 years ago, we used to really, when we would show this slide, we would say, here's the state's incidence rate, here is Simsbury incidence rate. So on this slide is, the blue line represents the October 1 Simsbury count. The red line is where we've landed in June of a same school year. So there's always growth from October 1st to June 30th of students with needs identified through the year. And then the yellow line on this graph is the state incident rate, so the total incidence of special education students in the state of Connecticut. You will see across the state there have been increases in special education incidents. If you look at Simsbury, we continue to grow at a larger increase rate. And there are two things that we really correlate that with. One is the increased needs of our preschool students here, and how we continue to see increased needs. A few years ago, we also talked about the increased needs of our secondary students around the area of mental health. That is all adding to Simsbury Public Schools incidence rate. The correlative impact of COVID as well. The second, and we'll talk a little bit around specific data points in this, is students moving to Simsbury at a higher rate with special education needs already established. So a few years ago, we showed, or I think it was last year, we shared some data where in one of our buildings, 25% of the students who moved in already had identified special education needs. So that is, we are seeing students move in with a higher percentage of already identified needs, and that both of those are impacting the increase in our incidence rate. So right now, we are right at the state incidence rates for 10-1. We are projected to be above that in June. That final red data point for 23-24 is a projection with what we typically see an increase around. So want to just review some information around how does the district fund special education services and supports here in Simsbury. There's three main ways with which we fund special education here in the district. The first is through the operating budget. The second is through an excess cost reimbursement grant from the state of Connecticut. And the last is through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA grant. All three of these are combined in its ability to fund the Simsbury Public Schools special education programs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our excess cost grant. When I use that term, how is that determined? What does that mean? Excess cost grant is when you have a student in district who requires supports above and beyond the per pupil expenditure. We keep track of what those services look like and what they are costing the district to provide. When a student, as determined by the state of Connecticut, reaches 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure, that is the threshold for qualifying for the excess cost grant. So we have 4.5 times of our per pupil expenditure is just over $87,000. Typically, anything over that threshold, the state provides reimbursement through the grant back. Last year, we received just about 73% of expenditures over that threshold. This year, because again, the state across Connecticut, they are seeing more and more students requiring 4.5 times of their per pupil expenditure, and the state legislation has not reappropriated special education funds to increase that excess cost grant dollar amount. We are expected to receive somewhere around 68% of expenditures over the threshold. So our needs continue to rise, number of students that hit that 4.5% threshold, and unfortunately, because the aggregate pot across the state continues to grow, that percentage has gone down. So our operating budget then covers the net of these excess costs. This year, we are estimated to receive reimbursement through the excess cost grant of around $2.4 million.
And Katie, the rub on that legislation is when it was written, it was supposed to be reimbursed at 85%.
Right.
If you look historically, we've had years where we get 85%, over 85%, and then recent years, it has been just under 80%, and then since COVID, these last 2 to 3 years, it has been reduced drastically. 68% is very far from 85%. So it's not just our district that really feels this.
Exactly, and I'm stating the obvious when I say that, though. I mean, one of the challenges last year, and we didn't do this, we budgeted conservatively, but many other towns were told that we were going to be reimbursed at a rate of 81% last year,
Yeah.
and it did not come through. So many towns budgeted at that rate in good faith, and then, received 70, 71%, and depending on the scale and scope of your operation, it hits you in different ways, right? It might hit a smaller community for 200,000, might hit somebody like West Hartford for 2 million. It's just a real challenge in how we look at trying to plan effectively here.
Is that 73 or 60? Is that the same for every town? Is it like you said the pot and
Yeah,
splitting
so
the pot?
there's the pot, and it's a 3-tiered system based on multiple factors, but really almost a look at a wealth index of the town. So from a reimbursement favorability standpoint, we don't fare as well there as some of the other towns. We're in that top tier. I think it's like 28 towns or so that receive we'll get 65, tier 2 will get 70, I think. It's like a 5% differential. Tier 3 will get 75.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So when you look at excess costs, students that qualify for excess costs, something we've talked about over the last few years is students that require out-of-district support. So these are students who require, they have needs that require a support that cannot be provided within district. So they are, they attend state-approved private special education schools, and we pay their tuition for those schools. And one of the things we've talked about in recent years was the increased number of students. We've put forth last year's out-of-district information, and this year's. You will see our number of students is relatively the same as last year, but the total cost is significantly different. And what we've put forth is the change in those tuition amounts. So again, special education costs statewide continue to rise, and so we saw a great change in the median and average tuition cost for those students that are placed out of district. So you will see last year, the average cost for a student who attended an out-of-district placement was $81,000. This year, that same tuition average cost is $92,000. That's significant when you're looking at a total number of students of 40 plus. So that is, again, something that is a key data point of the increasing costs to provide special education services.
Are these costs inclusive, are they inclusive of transportation?
What does it include?
They are tuition-based costs,
So they do not include transportation costs?
no,
Okay.
they are tuition only.
Okay.
And just to new members of the board, and just to remind people last year, this is an area where we had kind of historically for 2 to 3 years carried a deficit and figured out different ways to cover it within the operating budget. Last year, Board of Finance, it was in our presentation, but very helpful in covering the deficit of $500,000. The challenge is that deficit is basically shifted based on tuition costs to just move to another year. So, I mean, these are things we need to continue to think about. It's twofold, right? Strengthening our internal programs a little bit to hopefully alleviate future placements out in certain situations. But I believe it's an area we need to have more conversation at the state level with in terms of just cost escalation. Hi, Melissa, yes. And, those different legislative areas. So we really appreciate you coming out. We do.
Actually, Kate, I was just gonna say for maybe some of the newer people, or maybe a refresher for some of the other folks, other board members, just what's an example of why you would need to move a student out of district placement?
It's a great question. There's a variety of reasons. It really depends on the scope of their disability, which could range from a significant learning disability to a significant behavioral disability. So it really does range in those reasons. However, it also, it really is when we determine as a team, so the planning and placement team really looks at, is the environment meeting their needs? Again, our duty as a public education school system is to ensure that we are providing adequate access to that education. And if we are not able to do that, depending on the scope of their disability, that severity of their disability, that is when we look to for an alternate environment. It's not something that is done lightly. We want all of our students in their neighborhood schools with their peers. And so it is something that is many conversations, certain collaboration with multiple team members. But it comes down to the significance and severity of the disability. Again, the range from learning to behavioral to the scope of it could be autism, their disability, as well as how are we able to instruct them in the current environment.
Is there a follow up there just to make sure that the out of district placement, they are providing the necessary services? Like what's
That is something that for years Simsbury has done very well. Our supervisors, myself, we case manage our students that are out of district, and we are constantly attending those meetings, and we are challenging our out of district placements to ensure that they then are really providing that adequate access to education, because we want to certainly ensure that all of our students have that.
So I have two questions. One is, when we look at those that have gone out, is there any evidence that some have gone out and then based on their needs being satisfied, we've been able to pull them back in?
Always the goal, and yes, there are, every year, we will have a few students that we are able to come back to a lesser restrictive environment. They're able to come back to their neighborhood school. We have annual meetings typically with our out-of-district students. We're having more than annual meetings to talk about what's the goals and how are we working them back towards their district school, because that is certainly the goal. It's for everyone, for parents, for the team members. We want our students here in district.
And then the second question was that you said that I think there was a question about what does it include, and you said it doesn't include transportation.
No, not these figures up here.
So where's the transportation cost? Because I'm thinking that's part of the full package. Where's that cost?
Yeah, so that's something that certainly through the budget process, the transportation costs this year haven't really, there isn't a great change or impact to data that you guys have seen in the past. It will certainly be part of the full budget picture as you guys go into workshop and other budget activities this year. And it is certainly something that we've put into our budget for next year. It is not one of the driving data points around our requests.
I will share this because it's a really good question. It's a challenge post-COVID. It's like supply and demand, right? Like Salters used to be able to manage almost all, if not all, of our runs to outplace schools. You do those on vans normally. Cost controlled as part of our negotiation with Salters. Unable to field as many drivers as we had pre-COVID, sometimes we need to go third party, and those prices are way up compared to what they were before. So that's something we continue to look at post-COVID. How can we, work with JR to expand that fleet and expand that operation so it can be encompassed in our overall transportation contract a little more effectively.
Matt, I have to just reiterate, we're lucky that we have such a great relationship with Salters because he's constantly talking to us about what he can and can't, we're constantly trying to make those moves. He's also very fair in that regard of his routes. We are not the only district dealing with these third-party transportation needs. It is certainly something that other directors and myself are constantly having conversations with the State Department of Ed and the Bureau of Special Education around how do we help control some of these costs through things such as third-party vendors, contracted services. Some of the driving parts of our budget, how can the state help us start to regulate some of the price that they charge?
Sharon, we also try to reach out to other districts as well that are going to the same placements to see if we can share routes and share costs.
I was just real quick trying to follow like the dollars a little bit. So when we hit 4.5 times like the per pupil cost, it's considered in excess, right? Or so our average per student cost is around $20,000, give or take. But our average student who's placed elsewhere is $92,000. So
We have students both in district and out of district that hit that threshold based on the services and supports that they receive.
Right.
So we track each of their needs and calculate what their their pupil expenditure is.
there's all sorts of factors.
So that excess cost reimbursement rate is for both out-of-district placed students as well as in-district students. It's a combination of those. We do have some students, you see that average cost of $92,000 that are out-of-district and they don't necessarily hit that threshold. So it's looking district-wide at any student that's need supersede 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure.
And Brian, we budget net that excess cost grant, right? So
Right.
we don't budget for the 4.6 million you see on that chart. We would budget 4.6 minus the 2.1.
Excuse my ignorance on this point.
Okay.
Our special education programs, are they fully inclusive for all kids who stay within district?
So we have a variety of programs across district. I've mentioned our intensive learning needs program. Certainly, we are having students participate in meaningful inclusion to the greatest extent they are able to. But we do offer some supports and alternate education type of placements based on their individualized needs. But yes, all of our students have the ability to be meaningful included and a part of general education programs as their programs and needs are allowed and supported.
Has that number changed a lot? The number of students like, has it been around 50 for 5 years, 10 years?
It's in the last, we had, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago where we saw a big increase. We went from about 38 to about 45. I think it was 2 years ago last year. And for the last 2 years, we've been pretty flat. We saw a big rise post-COVID of those out-of-district needs, but it's been flat for, like I said, the past 2 to 3 years.
One question. So given kind of some, I appreciate all the answers. You're saying there's the ability to some extent, and you take it, very deliberate on these decisions because the goal is keeping the neighborhood schools. What's the role of like the parents or guardians in the decision process here for if you decide they need to go somewhere else?
So I mentioned the planning and, it's a great question. I mentioned the planning and placement team. That is inclusive of parents. So it is a team decision. It's certainly going to be driven by data around the individualized education plan. How is the student doing towards accessing goals and objectives, accessing the services that are put forth? How are we adjusting that plan? We are constantly meeting through a PPT with parents, with all team members to talk about individual student needs to make sure we are adjusting so that we can support students in their schools.
So last question that I have on this is, we talked that some of this is behavioral, right? But then some of this is just a learning gap, right? So if we go back to COVID, because I'm hearing you say that, we had some spikes as a result of COVID, and I know that we had gaps, right? So is there any way that you've been able to kind of bucket where the needs have been greater?
Again, anything back to COVID, I would say is correlative. We haven't, it's not like I saw this, or the district saw this great increase of one type of need post-COVID. It was more general increased needs across the students, those complexity of needs from mental health. Certainly, I can think of individual situations where maybe learning was something that became a greater point of conversation, but I can't tie anything directly back through the data. Okay, want to transition into another data slide and data point that really pinpoints both the increased incidence, but also is the start of looking at the increase to the complexity of needs of our students. So I've talked a little bit about our intensive learning needs program here in district. That is, when I say intensive learning needs, what do I mean by that program? These are students that require a multitude of services. It involves a multitude of team members, so related service providers such as speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, board certified behavior analysts, paraeducators, as well as special education teachers. And these students, the programs that they participate in, it takes a lot of coordination, a lot of communication between families and their daily providers, so that these students, sometimes they don't have typical communication. They can't go home and talk about what their day looked like. So it is extremely important that we meet the needs of these students, that we let our educators take the time that they need in order to communicate and collaborate to support their needs. A data point that I really think is important to understanding and some of our budget requests as we go into next year is the total new or move-in enrollment of intensive learning needs students in our district. There's a 3-year data point here. You'll see in the 21-22 school year, we had one unanticipated move-in of a student who required intensive learning needs support. Last year, we saw unanticipated needs move into district at the number of 5. This year, so at this time last year, I didn't know, no one in district could have planned for 11 new intensive learning needs students needing those supports here in Simsbury, coming to Simsbury and needing that level of support. Certainly, that's had an impact and is something that will be a driving force as we look into our budget requests for the upcoming 24-25 school year. Our staff is amazing, and they are supporting those needs. We're making on the in the moment adjustments and trying to certainly add those supports and services where we need to through either a contracted service lens or through adjustments of staff. But it's something that we really need to take a look at so that the students that are now here can truly have those intensive learning needs met through their programs. Jeff, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. No, if I just want to make sure I say this back, because this is really an amazing slide, I think. So if I'm hearing you, what you're telling me is, or telling us is, there in the last 3 years, let's just take it as an aggregate, 17 students moved into the district post the start of the year, so unbudgeted. Those students who moved into the district were higher intensive needs, which require obviously more services and has obviously a big impact on the staffing. So that's, I guess maybe I just want to make sure I had that right. And then secondly, would any of these 17 then kind of going back to the last slide about outplacement or out of district, would any of these 17 then be out of district, or?
I think one
Okay.
of those students, and that's majority of those students are in our intensive learning needs program, which is a pre-K 6 program, and that is really impacted our elementary intensive learning needs caseloads.
2 sites, two
Two
hills,
sites. We have 4
Squadron
classrooms
line.
currently between Tooten Hills and Squadron Lines. And again, just for those of you that have been in town for a while, that's been formerly known as our Ready, Set, Go, or RSG programs.
And what does that then do to, I apologize if I can just jump in on it. Again, just like caseloads and staff. I mean, that, because if the intensive individuals are coming to the district, right, that's, that's got to have a significant impact on your paras or whatever, your staffing, your teachers, all of this.
So our students that require intensive learning needs programming are on they are in kind of a caseload of their own. So they have a case manager who specializes in providing and coordinating intensive learning needs. And, we really, right now, those caseloads are right around 10. And ideally, we'd like to see those down a few students, because 10 might not sound like a large number, but if you come back to what I said around the coordination of these programs, the amount of individuals involved, and that communication that is just so important between the school and the home about what that child's program and day looks like, it takes time. And so, ideally, we would like to see caseloads around 6 or 7 so that we can teachers have that time to really ensure that that program support is there.
No, 10 sounds like a lot to me. But just one last question. Then, if you're having more kids come into the district, which requires more staff, just for a sec, like, how are you on space, right? Do you have the space for these folks, especially when you haven't budgeted them for them during,
So that is something, that's one of those in the moment this year adjustments that we've been able to make. We've partnered with with Squadron Line, so it's Pupil Services and Squadron Line Administration. Neil's been absolutely a key part of this. We have been able to find space in order to provide more classroom space so that students' individualized needs, whether that be low sensory or group, we can meet those better just so that we had more space to support those.
I mean, you hit the key points. I mean, there are stressors on all those points right now. Conversations with parents, there's stressors about communication, there's some safety concerns, there's space concerns. Your teachers are stressed because they want to do the best for these kids and they don't feel like they're at their best right now. There's been some turnover, stability in paraeducators just in the industry as a whole. So it's like all three wheels of that kind of need to be firmed up, or an attempt to firm those up in this process. So we're trying to show you with the data.
Just kind of taking another turn into data, this is a different look at how that increased incidence continues to impact us in a different way in district, and that is at Simsbury High School. Last year, we certainly addressed elementary caseloads. This is looking at our high school caseloads. Currently at Simsbury High School, caseloads range somewhere in that 24 to 32 range. And again, across the Farmington Valley, you'll notice that range is lower. So as our incidence rate of monks, so at Simsbury High School, our incident rate is right around 20%. So 20% of Simsbury High School students have an identified disability that requires an IEP. And so those caseloads have grown, and we really, as you see in the budget requests, need to work with those numbers and be able to meet their needs in a different way.
So if I'm following correctly what you just showed, at the high school level, per person is handling 24 to 32?
Case managing, so they are in charge of providing those services identified through the individualized education plan, not just not doing it's that individualized instruction. It could be 60 minutes a week, it could be 40 minutes 4 times a week, so it's not their full day. It's not a self-contained program. These are our students that require academic support or some other identified needs through their IEP, and they require a special education teacher to provide that direct instruction.
Thank you.
Again, where our incidence rate and our complexity of needs is continuing to impact us at the middle school level is in the area of specialized reading. So right now we have students at the middle school level who we've seen an increase. There's an identified group of students that require structured literacy instruction. This is it's time intensive, and it has specific teacher training requirements. Phonological awareness, a lot of students with dyslexia require this direct level of reading instruction. Right now, we have 21 students with these individualized structured literacy needs, and we are servicing those through a contracted service model. Next year, we are projected to have 31 students that require this level of intensive instruction in reading. So you'll see this data impacting our requests as well. Last piece of data that I want to share with you this evening is our preschool data. So kind of started with our overall enrollment and that change of incidents, and you'll see here, where is that in preschool? If you look at the 2018-2019 school year, in June we would end with low 20s, 21, 22 students that required special education needs in this district. This year we are projected to end the school year with 58 students in Simsbury that require specialized instruction through special education services at the preschool level. Again, just a reminder, preschool works differently in the fact that we do receive referrals from both parents and birth to 3 services, and that the school system, the public school district assumes responsibility for identified services at the age of 3. So it's a rolling admissions. And so we do get notice of students that could require special education services about 6 months in advance through birth to 3. So, you know, we do our best. We have a great supervisor at the preschool level who connects with our local preschools, our birth to 3 providers to understand the students' needs that are coming into preschool programs. So all of these data points.
Yeah, and I just want to add too that there's a dance that happens between our preschool director, Nikki Mahan, and Katie, because the preschool that we run, the Children's Academy, relies on tuition from paying customers to keep afloat. And if there's not enough room for paying customers because seats need to be filled by students who require the services, there's this kind of push-pull of how do we keep it going. And Nikki takes the new registrations of the families in Simsbury that want to access our preschool starting on January 1st. She's filled the seats already for next year. I mean, there's enough need that, we can't soon enough open Latimer Lane to get a little bit of space relief.
Where are we at with enrollment for preschool? Kind of off topic, but.
We have 4 classrooms. There are up to 18 seats, and those are sort of broken up. There's morning seats and afternoon seats and
All squadron?
all at Squadron.
Yes.
Yep. So it's a very challenging
So just under 80,
model.
80 kids.
So,
And I mean, the partnership works out, but there's a lot of management of this.
Yes.
just so I
Lot of
understand
negotiation.
what you're saying, does that mean that the preschool is required to take anyone that's been identified through the birth to 3 program into the preschool program, the Children's Academy?
Any student that's been identified through birth to 3, we are required to evaluate to see if they meet the threshold of special education, if they have a disability that requires direct instruction through an IEP. So any student that's receiving birth to 3 in town, we're made aware of, and they are referred to special education, and then we decide, do they meet eligibility criteria for special education? Because the criteria for birth to 3 is different than special education. It's run by different legislative federal mandates, and we have very specific educational criteria that we need to look at.
So if they meet the criteria as determined by your team, then the Children's Academy must provide a seat for them. Is that the flow?
We must provide services for them.
Okay.
We do have some students that meet eligibility criteria for speech and language impairment, and we can do that through a different model of we provide speech and language services, and that's all they need. Other students do require an academic environment in order to access their goals and objectives. So for those students, yes, we work collaboratively with the Children's Academy. We have selected spots that we've chosen at the beginning of the year, a certain allotment. These increasing enrollments, to what Neil is saying, is we're running out of those already agreed upon allotments, and that messes with the Children's Academy funding. And then we have to find ways to provide the services we are required to by law.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
The best way to say that is, when I started in this, each preschool classroom had 4 seats just set aside for special education, like that. And then soon, shortly after I started, 4 wasn't enough. They're going to need 5 seats. 5 seats aren't enough anymore. Like, it's becoming
How many seats are generally needed now?
more than 5.
Are we at like 10 seats, half the kids out of the
No.
preschool
No,
class?
no. So we break it up. So we offer for our students that are eligible for special education, it's typically a half-day program. So Neil talked about the various makeup of our Children's Academy seats. So we typically have 5 seats in the morning, 5 seats in the afternoon, so 40 seats across. Of the current students, some of those will be those speech and language only students, so they won't require that, but we will run out of the 40 seats that we have this year, and so we're working collaboratively to find a way to ensure that all students have their needs met and that we are able to provide those.
So you mentioned we're almost at 20% from K through 12.
We're almost at 20%, or we are at 20% at Simsbury High School.
Oh, at the high school.
District-wide, we are at 17%.
And at preschool?
Preschool, so our students, and Neil, you might have to
It's
help
hard-
me.
It's hard to say
develop an
because
instant, right?
not all, some preschool students are 2 days a week, 3 days a week, all day, afternoon.
Couple hours here, there.
Special orders don't upset us.
And we don't, again, it's not all students in town, so it's hard to have that percentage. Okay. So all of this data, and I appreciate you guys sitting through these pertinent data points, yield our budget requests. On this first slide, you will see specific positions that will help support the services and the supports that our students require in those areas of need. The first 2 lines are around our intensive learning needs, or ILN. That's what we use the abbreviation here. We really are going to be asking for 2 additional certified special education teachers for those intensive learning needs programs, pre-K to 6, as well as, and I talked a little bit about the immense amount of coordination that the intensive learning needs program requires. A program coordinator to really oversee those on-ramps and through lines for our programming from pre-K to 12. So we have a functional academic program at the high school and middle school level. Our students in those programs all require such an intense amount of coordination and programming. It's really important that we have some leadership and support for our teachers, for our families, to help assist that through line. The third request is around our Simsbury High School special education teacher needs, asking for an additional teacher there. In regards to our reading instruction at the middle school, really see the need to replace those contracted services which come at a higher rate, and look towards a reading specialist that we could have full-time to assist with those those increased needs. And lastly, given the increased number of preschool students that we have enrolled, we truly are in need of an additional preschool case manager. So it is a lot of personnel requests. I understand that, and certainly appreciate the board's discussion and consideration around this. And I know that Neil, Sue, Matt, myself are happy to answer additional questions and will be providing additional information throughout this process to help you on the data around the why. Okay.
Just for perspective on the ask of 1 or 2, do you know the numbers? It doesn't have to be right now. I can ask Neil, like what we have currently at each spot.
So for intensive learning needs, so for the intensive learning needs for a pre-K 6, we have 4 teachers. We are projected to have, at this point, 43 students next year. Again, that's barring any more move-ins. We had 2 move-ins last week that require intensive learning needs. That's how this year has been. So we have 4 teachers right now, and we would ask to go to 6 for those 43 students. At the high school, we currently have, outside of our functional academic teacher and our pathways teacher, we have 6 special education teachers that support academic needs. At the preschool level, the reading specialist is really a new position, but at the preschool level, we currently have 2 special ed academic case managers. Their caseloads for preschool right now are right around 20. Projected to go up a little bit again with that enrolling admissions through the end of the year. So that's really centered around the request to go to 3.
The ILN two certified teachers that you're asking for, are those at the elementary school level? You said K-6?
Pre-K-6.
Oh, pre-K-6.
So again, we look at in intensive learning needs. We have students in our preschool program, but they really start that intensive learning needs programming as soon as they enter our district. And so that programming looks different than other preschoolers programming might who have different level of needs. So when we look at intensive learning needs, it's really important to put all of our students pre-K-6 under an umbrella and say, how do we best meet these complex needs of the students?
Katie, in your early planning, is it essentially one additional at Squadron and one additional at Tooten? Or are you looking at it differently?
Early planning, I think we have to do some, again, if we're able to get two, we need to look at space and we need to really look at what makes sense for those programs, but that's the initial thought process.
Thank you.
And you said the middle school was a new one, and then the coordinator, the ILM program coordinator, do we have any yet, or this
No.
would be new?
We do not. So that's really a position that where we want to provide someone that is in the program daily, working with the kids, understanding the teachers and the needs, and able to support and coordinate those communications, ensuring that the collaborations between service providers and case managers and really supporting the programming. I use that word a lot, but that means like, what does their individual programming needs look like and adjusting them. It will offer our special ed teachers that consistent person to really oversee and look to make sure that programming threads and on-ramps to other teachers through their progression in our district makes sense, so that, again, because for even our littlest preschoolers that's in the intensive learning needs, our staff is already thinking about what does that student need when they're 18? How do we support that? How do we start to get that? And having someone across the district to help our teachers, great ideas, amazing abilities, really ensure that what they're doing in kindergarten or 6th grade is helping to ensure appropriate programming in 10th grade, 11th grade, increasing all of their and maximizing their success.
Josh, we did have a similar position before, but the person retired. And so we thought we would be able to absorb those needs in different ways. And then we had this immense growth that Katie showed in the slides. And we're realizing that that was a part of our programming that currently we have to revisit because it was an important resource to our families, but also to our teachers.
Makes sense. And last one on it, middle school, you mentioned the reading would be a new one. So is the middle school right now, you talked about high school, elementary school, preschool. Does middle school have something right now, or this reading interventionist would be new?
So they have the special education teachers, case managers that I've spoken about at both preschool or high school. They have their functional academic program. What we are seeing at the middle school right now is a increased need of students that require this individual, highly trained level of reading instruction in their IEPs, more than we've ever seen before. And in order for us to meet those students' needs, our case managers, they're already teaching 5 classes of co-taught English or co-taught math or a resource type of room. We don't have anyone currently to teach the 31 students that require individualized reading instruction, and so that's what this position would do.
So I have a question. You know, we added the math intervention, and did we add reading as well?
So we have, I think what you're referring to is the skills tutors and interventionists at the middle school. That is correct, but they don't necessarily service students with IEPs or their IEP goals. Those are interventionists that are kind of a step above what is required in intensity outside of the classroom, but they're not necessarily students with IEPs.
And I know, I mean, I hear even in the community about the math interventionists, but I never really hear about the reading. So I just, is it being utilized? Or?
Yes, I mean, I'm happy to give you an update at another time on students that are accessing that interventionist resource, but it's being effectively utilized, that data is being looked at, and some good gains are being made.
Okay.
And I'm
So
sorry,
those are-
one more thing. Vera. I tried to go back to the slide thinking I missed it because you said that there was 11 new that we didn't know about coming in to the ILN. But the what is the total number in the ILN? I couldn't.
Great question.
I didn't see that.
So right now, we're at 39 students in the intensive learning needs program, and again, and that's pre-K 6.
Right.
Again, there's some specific individual decisions within the 11 that have moved in that impact those numbers. But again, total number right now is 39. And have a student starting within the next few days. That will change that number to 40, and continue to see that grow with projected to have 43 next year. So that's with students that are starting in preschool with those needs later this spring. The second budget request slide that is really just around two areas that we certainly need the board to consider. We'll provide additional information around. But when we talk about the complexity of needs that our students in the intensive learning needs program require, as well as the continued increase in incidence, an area that I cannot leave out as a speech language pathologist myself is the related service staffing. Certainly, it is not as clear cut as a caseload of a special education teacher, but our related service staff has continued to be impacted by these increased needs and numbers. So really looking at the data around that impact, how does it differ this year to last year given those intensive learning needs students and their required services? And that's something that is certainly an additional budget concern going into next year. And the second was back to that out-of-district slide, the out-of-district tuition funding. When you look at the budget, how do we continue to support that change in tuition from year to year? That is no longer a pretty predictable 3%. It's variable and growing and increasing. Okay.
For the out-of-district schools that we're sending children to, are there commonalities? Like, is there a particular area that if we beefed up internally, we could not send as many children out, or areas?
There's some buckets, yes. It's not like two. There's multiple buckets, but certainly, as Matt said earlier, that is something we continue to look at is, would it make sense to change some of our program offerings in order to, or to add program offerings in order to support? So it is something that we continue to look into.
Can you share what some of those buckets are?
Significant learning disabilities, autism, behavior, mental health, really falling into those areas of disability. Overlapping of some of all four, two.
It's just hard to for me to grasp it because I view Simsbury as like a town that has like the best special ed program, and then we're farming out, or people are going like 50 are leaving.
Yeah.
It's just like, I know.
I think it speaks to the intensity of need.
Yeah,
right?
Sad.
It really does speak to the intensity of need. They require a level of staff as well as the structure of the environment in a very different way than we can do in a general ed or public school. They truly require a level of instruction that goes far beyond what we could provide in public school, whether that be from staff to student ratio or space or the level of coordination of all those service providers and the amount of board
Not like they're
certified
going to Farmington High School or Avon
No.
or Granby.
No.
Great.
Okay. Okay. So that is
Thank
the
you.
totality of our report this evening. I appreciate your time and certainly any follow-up questions, like I said, Neil, Sue, Matt, myself, all continue to answer and provide information around special education. Cannot thank the board enough, though, for their continued support. I come back to what you said, Brian. I agree with you. We always are able to provide for our students. I come back to our educators here in district. They want the best for their special education students because it's important. And all students are gen ed students first, and that continues and will always be the mission of the Pupil Services Department here in Simsbury.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Katie.
much.
I appreciate how you grounded this in the data. I think the enrollment information is really important. And just want to remind the board, I mean, I know, it's very early in the process. We'll have multiple times to come back and be able to talk about this. Right? We know it's one thing to identify the needs, and the needs are real. It's another to come up with ways to try to fund them as efficiently as we can and look at different ways to do that. Certainly our work is cut out for us. There's other areas of the operation we'll be talking to you about that have some need as well. And then certainly that workshop time when we come together, as you know, board members that have been here, is when we can really get your input and feedback, and we can provide ideas, and we can think about solutions to collaborate moving forward. But certainly our challenge, as you know, coming out of the tri-board meeting with where we are with grand list in the town and everything else. I mean, we have some real challenges to consider, and work to be done. But great job, Katie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Other questions, comments there? Great. The last item is, you'll see in your packet the committee assignments for 23-24. Just a side note, I already need to make an addendum. Jess is going to be on, has agreed to be on communications, and it will replace Sharon there. I appreciate her willingness to do that. And there may be another tweak or two along the way, but you have that in front of you. You vote on it, or?
No.
Okay, perfect, even better. So that's that. Any comments, feedback? Appreciate everybody's flexibility on these. Lastly, public audience. Anybody? Our next meeting is the 23rd. It's here, or is it in Latimer? It's in Latimer. Oh, we moved it here.
Back to
We do it here. Okay. All right, we will be back here. All right. Thanks, everybody. I guess
We'll get you to Latimer.
Stand. Don't worry. Oh, we need. Yeah, I can't just. I need a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Right, second.
I'll second.
All those in favor.
Aye.
Thank you, Katie.